Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. The public can attend tonight's meeting in person at the George DeSierro City and County Buildings Chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Broomfield's website, broomfield.org/live. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the item the resident would like to comment on. If you would like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 in the queue have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. For our hearing impaired residents present, we have wireless headsets available through the AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
Henkel.
Here.
Jaworski.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim.
Here.
Marsh Holshan.
Here.
Chef.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Councilmember-elect Delgadillo is joining virtually this evening. Therefore, following her virtual swearing in, we'll use roll call vote throughout the meeting. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. And we'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. At the January 24th City Council meeting, Paloma Delgadillo was appointed as council member for Ward 2. Judge Amy Bachman is with us this evening to swear in the new council member who is attending tonight's meeting virtually. Judge Bachman, would you like to come up? I don't know, the podium? Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and good evening, our newest council member, Councilmember Delgadillo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. All right. All right, council member, we're going to have you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your full name.
I, Paloma Delgadillo,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution,
that I will support the Constitution,
the laws of the United States and of the state of Colorado,
the laws of the United States and of the state of Colorado,
the charter and ordinances of the city and county of Broomfield,
the charter and ordinances of the city and county of Broomfield,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
to which I have been appointed.
to which I have been appointed.
Congratulations, council member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Bachman. And we will have a more formal welcoming ceremony next week at the next meeting in 2 weeks when we all get back together. Let the minutes reflect that Councilmember Delgadillo is now sworn in and is in attendance. We will move to public comment next. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed on the agenda. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Dave Feineman. I live in Skystone. I wanted to make the council aware of something that actually happened. A week ago, there was an emergency management town hall that was held at Skystone. This is in preparation for an evacuation drill that will be held later this month. And the interesting thing about it was that we actually had Dave Halen plus Broomfield Police plus North Metro Fire, all in this room at the same time, talking in a joined up way about issues around emergency preparation, not just for this drill, but concerns about emergency readiness for that area of town. My understanding is this particular one, the one at Skystone, is the first of these kind of evacuation drills that will be held through Broomfield. But obviously, what you need to do and how you prepare for it is different depending on the conditions in your neighborhood, kind of thing. I just wanted to say, I know you get an awful lot of grief and noise coming from things that don't appear to be working the way people expect. I just wanted to say this particular case actually went absolutely fantastically. And so I thought you should all be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feynman. We appreciate it. Anyone else like to be heard? I don't see any online. So council's community and event updates are next. Does any member of council have an update this evening? Councilmember Lim?
Yes, just so there's been notices, but just to bring it to the public's attention again, the Universal Waste Collection Community Forum will take place on February 16th from 5:30 to 7 here in council chambers. If you can't attend in person, there is also a link to connect virtually on the Broomfield Voice webpage for Universal Waste Collection. That is also where you can fill out a survey, which will be used as input to further discussions on Universal Waste Collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lim. Councilmember Ward?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So last week, RTD hosted 2 in-person forums regarding the Northwest Rail Peak study. But if you weren't able to go to those, they have until I think later in February, I don't remember the date offhand. You can go online and in their Northwest Rail Peak Service Study webpage, they have a link to essentially the slides that were presented, and you can leave public comments there about what you'd like the service to be and everything else about what other complaints you want to bring. So that's going to be up till sometime late February, I believe, but it's on RTD's website if you'd like to check it out for those who weren't able to go to the in-person meetings.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall Olson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring the attention to the community of presentation, the activity this weekend on Saturday, the Drag Queen Story Hour that's the library is hosting, and that's encourage all the community members to attend. And if you have any questions or concerns about it, then I encourage you to attend to see what it's really about. It's kind of been on social media a little bit this week, and some of the social media posts about it have not been very family friendly and very, encouraging to an inclusive community. So I really want to encourage everybody to check it out and to attend. I unfortunately am going to be in DC this weekend for the National Association of Counties Conference, so I won't be able to attend it, but please attend if you have any questions. And I just encourage, and I'm happy that Broomfield is an inclusive place, and the vast majority of our residents are not what is on social media, I guess, is the best way of putting it. So please attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quickly, our Broomfield Chamber had their breakfast this week and or last week, and we are now planning the Mardi Gras membership celebration for next week in Business Awards. You can attend either as a member or a non-member, and it's at the establishment in Westminster, again on February 16th from 6 to 9 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shah?
Thank you, Mayor. The Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport Community Noise Roundtable will meet on Monday, February 13th from 9 to 11. This is going to be a meeting hosting the FAA to discuss lead pollution as well as noise around the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. So please attend. That will be at the airport. And then the other thing, the mayor and I will leave tomorrow with the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners on our annual DC trip that we haven't done for 2 years. And we will be meeting with our congressional delegation to advocate for transportation funding within the Northwest Denver metro region. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. We have a jam-packed schedule too. We're meeting with the railroad, the FAA. It's a really good opportunity to get up close and personal and draw some attention our way for some much needed transportation and infrastructure funding. Any other council member updates? All right, moving on. Council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. The clerk will read all of the consent agenda items by title, and there will be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Following the clerk's reading of consent agenda items 7A through 7D, we'll ask for public comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A through 7D by title?
7A, approval of minutes from the regular meeting of January 24th, 2023. 7B, ordinance number 2205, amending certain sections within the Broomfield Municipal Code and adopting the 2021 International Building Code and related codes as primary codes by reference, with an effective date of April 15th, 2023, first reading. 7C, resolution number 2023-23, authorizing and approving an intergovernmental agreement by and between the city and county of Broomfield and the Colorado Department of Revenue for sales and use tax software, such system. Ordinance number 2207, amending certain sections of chapter 3-04 of the Broomfield Municipal Code relating to sales tax for remote sales, first reading. 7D, request for executive session for the purpose of receiving legal advice and obtaining instruction to negotiators regarding large development and redevelopment projects.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting in person. If anyone who'd like to be heard on these items, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Guess it's you, Mr. Feynman. Thanks for being here.
I'd just like to say a few words about the building code. First of all, county manager, a really good note. The first line basically says, the city charter basically says, we keep our building codes up to date against international standards. Therefore, I don't actually have an awful lot to say about exit signs on roofs or other things that are encountered in here. I basically say the people who have actually prepared Appendix 1 probably actually understood all the details and could express it better than I could. My concern, and the reason why I am standing here, is I sort of read it and felt like we're dealing with closing the barn door after the cows have left. Because buried in the back part of this same document, it talks about fire-related building materials, and we're deferring that particular discussion to some later date, which is not specified. My concern is, as you all know, we are building out the northeast part of the county very rapidly. It makes sense to tighten up the building code to actually fireproof some of the new structures. It makes sense to do it earlier. And so even though I recognize that approving an international standard is sort of like a rubber stamp and is probably an easy thing for us to do, maybe the hard one, which is dealing with what do we actually want about defensible space around buildings, about what kinds of materials we will take, and even if that actually impacts how much it costs to buy a house in Broomfield or build a house in Broomfield, maybe those are the real things that should be being pushed forward by the council sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on these items? Can we ask why we defer the fire mitigation things? Ms. Burton Duddy's walking over to the podium. I would like to get an answer for me too.
Thank you, Ms. Burtonzetti.
Thank you. Sorry for the long walk there. I'm Anna Burtonzetti, Co-Director of Community Development and Planning Director. And it is a good question and one that we think is important for us to address moving forward. First, we need to have a study session with the City Council to have a discussion regarding what we call the WUI codes, the wildland urban interface. And we're going to need to coordinate that with emergency services, with our building division, and with North Metro Fire Rescue to determine where we believe it's appropriate to apply the WUI codes and what would be most beneficial for Broomfield moving forward to ensure the safety of those areas. So it is something that we have on our radar for this year, part of our future Broomfield plan for 2023, but it is separate from the standard adoption that we bring forward every 3 years.
Wonderful answer. Thank you very much. Does any member of council have any comments on these agenda items? Since I went first, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out that the state legislature is currently looking at the WUI codes, and I'm the council representative for the Colorado Municipal League, and that's been a point of contention because some of that would be taking away a little bit of local control. So there's some concerns there, but I've been pushing them to understand that fire mitigation is not a local issue because fires don't care about boundaries. So that's something that probably is going to be coming forward this year. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of action happening around that at the State House for sure. Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I had similar questions about the when the wildland urban interface codes were coming for the study session, but there was a more basic question that I had about the sprinklers that are actually in the 2021 code and have been removed. So we chose not to implement part of the 2021 IRC code. And I understand I read the North Metro Fire letter that says that's okay. But I also understood my impression of the North Metro Fire letter was also they understood the situation where we need maybe some more modeling from baseline to figure out how it's going to work. But they seem to indicate that they really want this to move forward, that we would have residential structures with sprinklers as a requirement. Can you address that?
So I'd be happy to address that. And I may ask Tim Pate is joining me this evening. He's our chief building official, and he can also address more of the technical aspect as well. But as North Metro indicated, they understand that additional time was needed. We believe that we're getting really good information in terms of how we can do our reviews and apply the sprinklers in the North Park area. And that's a good case study in terms of an area where together North Metro, the fire district, the developer, Broomfield, we all came to the same understanding that that was an appropriate additional measure to place in that neighborhood. And I think as new developments come forward, we look at those each as a unique case, and North Metro is involved in our development review process to highly encourage or to require fire sprinkler systems where they're appropriate, but adopting them citywide, countywide as part of the residential code was not something we were looking at for this adoption, but is likely to be reconsidered as we move forward to the 2024 code based on how we are seeing it adopted with or brought into the homes within baseline.
I guess I'm curious. I mean, if the discussions with baseline agreed to put the sprinklers in, isn't there an cost? I mean, there's an advantage. I mean, some of those are rented, some of those are owned in baseline. So, I mean, but isn't there an insurance advantage to having those sprinklers in? And, you know, I'm thinking baseline would not be jumping at the chance to do things that aren't going to be cost effective for them. So why wouldn't it be cost effective for other developers?
And I should clarify, it is not just the cost effectiveness that we were looking at in that case. You're right, there is a cost associated if fire sprinklers would be required for residential, it would be required across the city for every new home. And that would have a financial impact on the cost of homes. In the case of Baseline, a lot of the decision was driven by the alleys, the density of the project, the width of the roadways, the on-street parking, and wanting to make sure that overall, looking at the entirety of the package, what we believed was necessary to ensure safety in the neighborhood. And an additional level was adding the fire sprinkler. But it wasn't necessarily that the cost was the primary driving factor, although it does impact the cost of for sale products within Baseline. They would have to pay for that additional amenity, facility amenity isn't quite the right word, but improvement within the home. But that cost is a good point, and one thing that is factoring into staff's recommendation to not include the fire sprinklers citywide across at this time.
I was thinking they save money on insurance. Is that not correct? Because it's a prevention measure.
They could be. I'm not sure if we have studies that look at
Do we?
at the trade-off, how long it would have to be in terms of the cost savings versus the upfront cost that is paid at the beginning. And Tim was shaking his head that we don't have that information, but we can see if we can find information before second reading.
So you say we have to wait till the 2024 code to put this in place, you think? with
That's
the
staff's
sprinklers?
recommendation at this time. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments on these items? Thank you, Mr. Pate and Ms. Burton Setti. Before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 7D is a request for executive session and requires 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for agenda items 7A through 7D be approved? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? No? Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jazersky.
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. There is no business before the Board of Social Services or the Board of Health this evening. The first item under council business this evening is council self-appointments to fill board and commission vacancies created by the resignation of William Lindstedt. Before we proceed with the item, now is a good time for council members to get out their devices. Mhm. Okay, this evening, City Council will appoint fellow elected officials to fill the following vacancies: the Broomfield Building Corporation, the Pension Committee, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, also known as Dr. Cog, and the Broomfield County Transportation Forum. Council will also have the opportunity to revisit other appointments if needed. Council has a copy of the staff report, which includes the list of vacancies as well as a comprehensive list of all the boards and commissions. For this evening, the procedures regarding the election process to fill the vacancies are set forth in section 6.1 of Council's Procedures and Rules of Order. In accordance with these procedures, the process tonight will be as follows. Nominees will be identified for each position. If the number of nominees does not exceed the number of vacancies, council will proceed directly with a motion to appoint. If the number of nominees exceeds the number of vacancies, council will proceed to vote using our electronic voting system. Results of each round will be electronically presented. Following completion of the electronic balloting, a motion to appoint candidates by name will be necessary. I will ask Danae Brouillard if she has any additional information she'd like to provide.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Just a couple of housekeeping items we wanted to share with you. This evening, we have Kelly Cole, Brian Honeycutt, IT Director Kateria Beta, and Joel Heine from the Attorney's Office to assist us with the voting. Additionally, we will not be voting on the Charter Review Committee tonight. We will do that strategically with the residents' appointments in March. So just wanted to mention that was in the document, but we will hold off on that this evening. Also, Councilmember Lim, thank you for bringing it to our attention that Communities That Care was not included in the chart. So we have added it to our tracking. It's an optional board and commission, so it'll be in the yellow section when you see an updated version of the spreadsheet spreadsheet that you saw, but we have added it for future tracking. And then the last thing I just want to mention is Ms. Kelly Cole just sent you all the voting links, so it should be at the very top of your inbox. We may need all of them, we may not need them at all, but they are there if needed. We are also aware that there may be some additional changes this night with resignations or changes amongst council. So we just ask, we're prepared to do that, but we might have to build some forms on the fly. So we just ask for patience as we do that. And otherwise, is there anything else to add? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brouillard. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. All right, no, there's no one on the phone either. So questions from city council members are next. Are there any questions from council regarding this item? We know what's going on. Okay, so I guess says, are there any nominations?
I suppose this is where I start to jump in and say what I can self-nominate for, and then hope that you all can help me out with some of the remaining items.
Okay, let's go start with you, Councilmember Delgadillo.
All right. So I would like to self-nominate for the Broomfield Building Corporation Board of Directors. I would like to self-nominate for the Pension Committee, and I know there's an alternate position open for the State Highway 7 Coalition. Is that being discussed at this time, or is that separate?
No, we can discuss it. It's perfect.
Okay.
We can revisit any of these right now while we have the agenda open on it. So would you like to be the alternate for the State Highway 7?
Yes, I can self-nominate to be the alternate for that one.
Okay. What about when I know that you expressed interest in possibly taking on one that Councilmember Marsh Holshan was willing to give up.
Yes,
The local
that is-
licensing authority.
yes, I am. I guess I would self-nominate for that if I can do that while someone's already in that position. And then I know Councilmember Marsh Holshan is interested in the Denver Regional Council of Governments position, which I would happily yield to my colleague.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you for stepping up, Councilmember. Councilmember Marsh Holshan, then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to self-nominate for the Denver Regional Council of Government alternate position, as well as I think that corresponds with the Transportation Forum as well. And then resign my position on local licensing, however that
I don't
works.
think, yeah, I've never had that happen. So sure, resign. That's perfect. Mayor Pro Tem.
So I was gonna motion that we just kick him off the LLA, but
Let's take a vote. No?
okay.
That's never happened to my knowledge either, so just
So-
trailblazing.
What I would do is though, make a motion to nominate Paloma Delgadillo to the Broomfield Building Corporation, the Pension Committee, and the Local Licensing Authority, and as an alternate to the State Highway 7.
And
whatever else it's called.
The LLA alternate.
Yeah, I said the alternate.
Oh, you did that. Okay.
LL alternate, was it the alternate to LLA? It's
Yeah.
it's actual position.
Oh, it's a full-on position. You sure you want it?
Too late, she already self-nominated.
I did self-nominate already.
Okay, you're it. Can I have a second? Anybody? Oh, and Councilmember Hinkle.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to appoint Councilmember Delgadillo to the Broomfield Building Corporation, the Pension Committee, the Local Licensing Authority, and the alternate for the State Highway 7 thing.
Coalition.
Thank you. I didn't know what it was. I was on that.
It was
when I
that,
first-
that one.
That one, the coalition. All right, so now can we do a roll call vote to? I know I'm not following the script.
We have to vote.
Not if are there any other nominations for these? If there's no nominations, then we can just approve by acclamation, which I would love to do. Does anybody else want to put their name in for these? All right. Well, then we have only one nomination for these vacancies and one vacancy. So and a second and a motion. So will the clerk please call the roll?
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jaworski.
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marshallson.
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Congratulations, Councilmember Delgadillo. So now we are taking Councilmember Marshallson. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll just make another motion if it's
I
all,
like that.
all
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
I'm going to motion to nominate Councilmember James Marshallsham as the alternate to the Dr. Cog position, and then also as I guess it's a member of our Broomfield Transportation Forum. Member and vice chair.
Do we need to elevate Councilmember Ward to the full first and then do?
But I would also motion to elevate Councilmember Ward as the primary member of Dr. Cog.
Yeah, and
Also and the chair of the Broomfield Transportation Forum.
thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can I have a second? Councilmember Ward,
I'll second it.
any discussion? All right, are there any other nominations for these vacancies? All right, then will the clerk please call the roll?
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Hinkle. Yes. Jaworski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marshallson.
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Congratulations to council members Ward and Marshallson. And there was one more swap. We were going to appoint Councilmember Lim to the CC4CA alternate position. Nomination, please. Nomination, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, well, at first, I guess I have to resign from that position before I get kicked out. And I was gonna resign easily until she told me that they have a retreat in Vail this year, so I was questioning my judgment, but I will still resign and nominate Councilmember Lim to that position.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Are there any other nominations for this vacancy? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hinkle,
You know, during COVID year, I was supposed to go to Vail, but I'll let Jean let him go to Vail. Yes, of course.
Jaworski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marshallson.
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo.
Yes.
Awesome. That passes unanimously too. So are there any other boards or appointments that people want to swap or change? This is the last call till we seat a new council in a year. We're all good? Well, it was a little unconventional. We didn't have to vote, but I appreciate you guys being ready. I totally went off script. It felt great. Thank you all very much and congratulations, you guys. Thanks for stepping up to take on these assignments. Let me scroll way down now. That completes our appointments. Thank you to all of my colleagues for dividing and conquering these additional responsibilities. I appreciate you. The final item under council business this evening is the consideration of a city council statement on statewide gun legislation. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Nancy Rogers, the city and county attorney. Tonight, we're here to discuss a statement by council asking the governor and state legislatures to look at and improve statewide gun legislation. Next slide. This came about following second reading of the majority of the firearm ordinances that were proposed, two of which that were tabled. It followed that discussion, which came after those two readings and then also two study sessions and also executive sessions on gun ordinances. And it was suggested given the challenges of passing these ordinances at the local level, and issues with jurisdictional issues related to these ordinances. Excuse me. The statement as drafted would be sent to the governor and certain leaders of the Colorado General Assembly. And a draft statement was included in the council packet. And I also have copies here if anybody would like a hard copy as well. Thanks. Are you good, John? Okay, good. And that would be, I also have extra copies if any of the council members would like a copy as well. That's all, Mayor. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Roxy Jula, Lockmore. I oppose this letter in any shape or form. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. I've already sent in my thoughts on the letter as it stands, and I trust that my comments and other people's comments will be addressed this evening. I did ask some questions that haven't been answered yet. So could someone share more about where it says in there how the Broomfield Police Department has educated the public on firearm safety? When and where was this done? How was it advertised? And was it a basic firearm safety class or something else? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to the phone. I don't see anyone in the queue for public comments. So questions from City Council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. Are there any questions? Councilmember Lim.
One question that was in the a resident's email. I would, if Ms. Rogers could address. So there was a statement that protested that that council has not asked about the constitutionality of these amendments in public and discussed it. So could you please address why or why not that would even be available for council to ask about in public?
Thank you, Councilmember Lim. As council knows, but the public might not be aware, when we have executive sessions, that's when I have a chance to have conversations with council on legal issues such as the constitutionality of an ordinance. Council represents my client, and those are attorney-client privilege conversations. I can, without divulging what was the substance of those conversations, say that that was the subject matter that we have discussed in those executive sessions, and also in some attorney-client privileged memos, the constitutionality of the ordinances. And as I have said in public meetings, the legal landscape, which remains uncertain and ever evolving on this issue. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. Is it possible to address Mr. Ewalt's questions regarding the police training? Is that something that we are able to do tonight, or are we just not prepared to give more details on those questions?
I don't have that information handy right now, but tonight we actually have the public safety update coming. It's right after the audit, 17B. So I think in that discussion, we can have the police department talk about that.
Great idea.
If she has that data with us, but they can talk about their training.
Okay, or a follow-up, that would be good too. We can, I'll re-ask that question at that time. Okay, thank you. And then can we just clarify, there have been some emails that have come in regarding a couple of the terms that we're using. One is high capacity magazines and one is assault weapons. And just and that's good questions of whether those have actually been banned or not. Can we get a clarification on there was a ban apparently on assault weapons in 1986, but is that just some of the assault weapons, or is that there's just a question of what does that term really mean? And it sounds like, or is this, the state still has to define what assault weapons means? Is that?
Yes, and yes. I think this is, and the language that is used in this letter is up to council, so we can modify this language as you see fit. But I do think that is, one of the challenges with, and we saw this with our ordinances, is how we define these terms. And that issue in and of itself is a very contentious issue as well. Our goal here was to address these automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons, assault weapons. And I understand the comment, because I read the letters as well, that is a politicized term, and I don't disagree with that. But it would be on the state, if they were to move forward with these laws, to look at the definitions and determine how best to define them. It is challenging to decide the terminology to use in a letter like this, because the terminology is so controversial in and of itself.
Okay, thank you. So we
And
could,
then on the large capacity magazines, I think there was a comment about, the state does have a ban right now. It is being challenged. And there's different large capacity magazine bans that could be considered if a legislative body like the state was going to consider it. Some have been 10, some have been 15. So, and what is a large capacity magazine is also a controversial term, because the argument is that those are standard magazines now, so that they're not odd or something that's large. They're standard and shouldn't be called something with an extra adjective.
okay, so would it be appropriate, as we discussed the amended language, to potentially look at changing high capacity magazines to something like lower capacity magazine limits, and something for the assault weapons to semi-automatic weapons? Or would that be the appropriate time to suggest those changes?
That would be up to council.
And we can talk about it. Okay, that is helpful. And I think that is all my questions.
That it?
And the time to do the amendment is
What, after?
yeah,
we
after
do
this.
the
Okay.
Motion and second, yeah.
I'm forgetting something here. Okay,
No,
thank you.
you're good. Okay. Any other questions from council? All right, seeing none. Thank you for the staff report, Ms. Rogers, if you want to call it that. If council would like to proceed with approving the proposed statement on statewide gun legislation, is there a motion? Councilmember Marshallson?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. So this would be the appropriate time to suggest the amended language. Okay, I would like to suggest some amended language to address some of the concerns that we have heard from the public.
Councilmember Anderson, if you don't mind, can I just go through these?
That would be great. Thank you.
So we'll go through these fast. On paragraph 4, it would be changing address to help reduce suicides in our community. On paragraph 6, it was a change in the language related to the division on comments about firearm education and the issue with it being codified into a law, and changing it to say there is public support for ensuring access to free or low-cost education or training. And I have copies of this slide deck if anybody would like it as well. I also have copies of Councilmember Anderson's letter. On paragraph 8, there is a sentence lower in the letter that was moved up to paragraph 8 to put the first priority being try to address the root causes of gun violence. And then Councilmember Anderson is suggesting adding on some information about the data that we had presented during the meetings. And going back to that one, increasing mental health awareness training in our school and our funding. Next slide on 3. Paragraph 9 revises the ask, saying we need the state to pursue reasonable solutions based on their data that can be shown to reduce the most prevalent gun violence, and removing the statement about common sense state laws that are data driven. Next slide. This is a change in paragraph, the second part of paragraph 2, revising the language relating to looking at mental health and that being an immediate crisis that has to be improved overall. And then there is that strike through of the letter that was moved up to earlier in the letter to try to put that primacy on looking at the root causes of gun violence before we do the ask on new laws. And then the last one is the very last sentence of the statement, changes it to say, we implore you to take action that will prevent gun violence in its many forms. Removing the specific asks in paragraph 10 on imposing laws regarding the purchase and possession, and asking the state legislatures to provide consistency to assure existing laws are prosecuted to the fullest and reasonable extent, and removing the language about closing the gaps. I think that's a short summary. Councilmember Anderson, though, if you want to add anything.
No, that was helpful. And just that we're open to this, I'm open to discussion and friendly amendments, so we can suggestions from other council members, but this was an intent to address some of the concerns that we were hearing from the residents.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. I have a procedural question for Ms. Rogers. When I called for public comments, there wasn't anybody in the queue on the CRL site. Now there is, but because of where we are in this amendment process, would it be okay to allow this person to make public comments? It's not a kind of.
No, and that would be up to you as presiding officer. And I
Okay,
think
well,
that's,
I saw them on the line,
Yeah.
so I knew that they were probably going to want to speak. They just didn't hit *3 in time. So let's go ahead and take our public comment from Cindy David. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Council. Sorry, I hit 3 and not *3, so my problem on my end. I'll make this really quick. I just wanted to reiterate basically what I sent in the letter, that I would appreciate it if we could consider having this letter address the 2 items that the vast majority of public comment and letters sent in. We had so much contention on some of the items that are listed in the letter and asking for the state to pass, restrictions on firearm purchases and possession. And if we could just limit the content of the letter to really convince the state that what they did was wrong by passing this to the local governments. It's not fair to you as a council or fair to the citizens, city by city, to deal with this. And also that it would be great if the state government and citizens of Colorado could work together to figure out ways for responsible firearm owners to understand the importance of proper storage, education, and training, and see what we could do together without passing restrictive laws. So thank you so much for letting me in late. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Ms. David. All right, so we have an amendment on the floor. Is there a second? Councilmember Leslie?
I'll second the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Lim?
I support the amendment. It still has the language intact in the first paragraph, and later, I think it's like the 7th paragraph, where it asks the state to pass the firearm regulations during the 2023 legislative session, which was our main intent, I think, in this letter, about the age restriction and the waiting period. So that's still intact. It's reasonable to me to ask for these decisions to be data-driven. And I support the addition of the emphasis on mental health awareness. And just wanted to note too that there's quite a few pieces of legislation that have been introduced already in the State House regarding these needs that would be generally addressed in that paragraph on mental health. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. So I support most of this. There's there's just some underlying issues that I'm kind of running into. I didn't feel like we were split on making gun education mandatory or not. I think it was this regional feeling as if we make it mandatory, then we need the rest of them to make it mandatory. And the whole reason behind this letter was to ask them to impose the laws. So if we're taking out that language, I disagree with that. So, you know, if council member Anderson would be amenable to just keep the language of saying, hey, we need you guys to impose laws that would affect everyone so that we don't have to piecemeal this together. Because I didn't get the sense that council, you know, didn't want gun education being mandatory. I didn't get a sense of that. And if we don't want it mandatory, we're going to run into some issues in June, you know, with what we put off and we kick the can down the road to do. So I still think like the end of it is not strong enough, and we're almost kind of giving confusing direction. I do like the mental health piece of it. And I think like I said, I just think that there's underlying tones of, hey, we're not sure if we want to make it mandatory. We just want to encourage everyone. Well, that's what we've been doing all along. Obviously, that's not working. We have to have something in place, some sort of, you know, law that makes it mandatory to have gun education before you can purchase a firearm. And that's what we're asking our state to do, among a few other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall Holstein.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to echo Councilmember Hinkle's comments. I support most of this. The mental health, obviously, is something that we need to focus on. I don't support the portion regarding softening language on the education portion, and I also don't support the last paragraph changes in softening language on imposing laws regarding purchase and possession of firearms. I think that's one thing that we were pretty set on, that we were going to pass a local ordinance on 10-day waiting period and 21 and under, but we put that off to the state. So I don't support that either. Can I offer a friendly amendment to Councilmember Anderson to split this amendment up into more than one vote, if that's possible?
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes, we, Nancy and I discussed that ahead of time, that she would be able to kind of do this as we go, and we can split it up when we get to the point where what's agreeable and what's not, so we can vote on what's agreeable and then separate the other part out. So yes, we can separate it.
So those two sections are the issues the parts that I have issues with. I don't know what paragraph it is, but the education piece, with the paragraph that starts with two themes, and then also the last paragraph. Those are the two that I have an issue with. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just really quickly say that I will support Councilmember Henkel and Councilmember Marshall Olson in regard to the language about education. And finally, just real quick, I just wanted to I think it's important to note that we need to not continue to stigmatize mental health and the issue of gun violence. It's a red herring and a whipping boy in the issue. There is no correlation between gun violence and mental health. In fact, people with mental health are more likely to be victims of gun violence. There is a correlation in the data between gun violence and gun ownership. So if we continue to divert our attention and think the solution is simply in mental health, quite honestly, we're kidding ourselves. It's not the solution that'll make a huge difference at all. We need more mental health resources badly, but doing that is not going to be a panacea for the amount of gun violence that we have in this country. The data tells us very clearly it is the rate of ownership and the power, the type of weaponry that can kill many, 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 many people very, very, very quickly. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would echo what Councilmember Cohen has just said. I agree with what Councilmember Henkel and Councilmember Marshall Olson addressed regarding education. I think it needs to be, we would like you to make this a law that is required and not be a little wishy-washy on what we're actually asking for in this letter. And then what Councilmember Cohen said in regards to the correlation between mental health and gun violence. there is no data that shows if you there isn't quite the correlation that shows if you have a mental health issue, other than suicide, that you have an increased risk of committing gun violence.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Anyone else? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to revisit the education component. And there's another way to also to modify, to edit this would be to change the wording to state that there was support among the majority of council members for the mandatory education. That was not what we heard from the citizens who came to speak. So we just need to correct that in one way or the other. We can change the language and Roger said she'd be able to do this on the fly, hopefully, if we need to get to this point, but then we just amend it to state, to somehow clarify that support was not coming from the community. That is the part that I want to clarify. This was the best way I thought to clarify it, but if we want to say that council was in favor of it, that would be a different statement. And then also, I'm struggling with this one. When we look at the mental health, we do have a mental health crisis in Broomfield, and there's way beyond this letter. There are things that we're going to be talking about and doing that is important. We had 24 out of 27 incidences from 2017 to 21 that were suicides, not homicides. So I don't know how we can argue that. In looking back at that data, I don't have it right in front of me here. But the data it wasn't within 10 days of purchasing a gun. It wasn't these things that we want to put in place aren't going to, they're not going to solve the crisis that we have of suicides in Broomfield. And that was the part I wanted to pull out. And it's not about stigma. It's about the loss of life of family members that could have gotten help and could have prevented the suicide. And I don't know how you can argue against that. Anyways, those are my comments. And I would actually probably not going to pass, but I would like to change the naming of the assault weapons to the semi-automatic rifles, because if that is truly what we are asking to be banned, and also to restate the high capacity magazines to be clear that that the state has already banned above 15 cartridges. What am I saying here? Anyways, the 50 higher than 50 capacity. That is my thoughts, and hopefully we can come to some kind of agreement on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So we're doing some editing, I'm guessing, amending the amendment.
I'm making notes right now, but
Okay.
I'm
Councilmember
waiting.
Marshall, we'll continue discussion.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one counterpoint to what Councilmember Anderson just said. I find I believe that the question about whether or not the community whether they support this or not is not well judged by the attendance at a council meeting. The attendance at a council meeting is 100 people that showed up, and they definitely leaned one direction, but that's not definitely indicative of the entire community as a whole. I would say rather the fact that the large majority of the people up on this dais ran as gun sense candidates and were elected by an overwhelming majority of Broomfield residents. That to me is a better sense of what the community wants than who may or may not shown up, who may or may not had the incentive to show up at a meeting. I mean, we get those a lot on a lot of different issues, and it's a pocket of people, but it doesn't necessarily represent the community. So that's my pushback on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Anderson, I have one quick question as a clarification before I give any further comment. When you were talking about suicide, were you lumping that in with mental health and making mental health really the large part of mental health that you were trying to address was suicide? Or were you not, were you trying to be more general with your comment on mental health?
Councilmember Anderson.
I am not quite clear on your
So,
questions.
no worries. So when you were talking about your amendment for mental health and how that was a key component of this letter, we need more access to mental health services and stuff like that. Were you using mental health as the term really to mean suicide related deaths, or were you trying to be more general with mental health?
Since this is a letter that is based on the gun ordinances, I mean, this is not a letter about mental health. So I want to be careful to not broaden that, but just to, and we can reword this however this council sees fit, but when you see that many suicides, there is some kind of crisis there, probably rooted in mental health. We need to get, to the bottom of that data. But that was the only focus of it. And I don't want to broaden it to those who committed suicide via hanging and other things. Like, this is not the only suicide. So I want to keep mental health focused just on the gun portion of it. And we still, I don't think we really know the answer to that. That just when there's that much suicide there, I don't know what else you would.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because while yes, I think suicide is a mental health crisis, I think when we use the term mental health in this context, it's usually construed to mean people that have other mental health issues like, let's say, schizophrenia or other psychological disorders. That's when I think of it, and when people who are opposed to gun legislation, they use mental health in a very broad term to mean anyone who has any sort of psychological disorder, suicide, depression, etc. And I think if we really want to tackle the suicide issue, which was Broomfield's largest cause of or reason for gun violence, then we should just be specific to suicide in and of itself when we're relating it to gun violence, and be very clear that when we're advocating for mental health issues, we're not being very broad with what mental health means. That's my only concern when we start using those two interchangeably. That's all I have right now, Mayor. Thank you.
Do you have any response, Councilmember Anderson?
My only response is if you have a suggested amendment, I mean, we can just end after, based on Broomfield's data for the time period, suicide was the most prevalent form of gun violence, coming for 24 out of 27 incidences, and then just leave it to the state to determine what they want to do with that. If we don't agree that that's a mental health issue, I sure think it is. But if we want to, that would be the place to suggest, just strike it.
All right, so I'm going to go to the two people who haven't spoken yet. First is Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just have a procedural question. So we have an amendment on the table. And at this point, we have not had another amendment that would further amend the amendment. So I would like to call the question on the amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
I shouldn't be
So,
paying attention.
Mayor, and this is a correction from the last time we
I
had
know.
called a question from former Councilmember Lindstadt. This does require 2/3. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have called the question on the floor and a second. We'll do a roll call vote, and we need a 2/3 majority for it to call the question. Got it. Thank you, Ms. Rogers. All right, will the clerk please call the roll? We are voting to call the question.
Jezerski,
So I just want to add that this is the second time someone's called the question just before I was going to make a comment. So that's a little little irritated by that, although my comment was going to be very similar to what Councilmember Schaaf just stated. And for the record, I was just going to say that I don't want to overthink this much too, overall, I think that Councilmember, I think Lori's her version was fine. The amendments are fine. I don't think there's much difference between the two, quite honestly. And this letter is basically gonna be read by a few people and probably thrown in the garbage. So this is not gonna make that much of a difference, I guess is my point. So yes.
Thank you.
Leslie,
I'm not ready to vote, if you will, because I don't think we're finished the debate. So I'm going to say no on this right now.
All right, thank you.
Lim. Marshall.
No.
Schaaf,
Yes.
Ward,
No.
Anderson,
No.
Cohen,
No.
Delgadillo,
No.
Henkel.
So we're voting on
Whether we're going
how
to
to
end debate.
separate them or just all of them?
To end debate
No,
and take
I'm
your
not ready
vote.
for that.
Okay. So, that call the question failed 8-2. Good try though. Good time, good practice.
Mayor,
Yes,
could I make a suggestion?
sure.
If we can pull back up the slides. If I could direct everybody's attention to the slide and because I think there's two of these edits that we're really talking about, and I'd like to maybe resolve the other ones.
Sure.
Potentially. So Kyle, could you go to slide 1? And I guess if I can have the floor for a second, Mayor.
Of course, Ms. Rogers.
What I'm thinking of doing is going through each of these and saying, generally, are you in support? And if we have an opposition, I'll put that one off to the side. But if there's our ones that everybody supports, then maybe we'll address those all together. And then we'll go back to a discussion of the 2 or 3 that might not have full support. Like, so this first change, the change from address to help reduce. I'll do it the other way. Anybody strongly object? Then we'll put that in group 1. The second one, this is about on the education and training. My understanding from the discussion is that this is one of the ones we want to keep discussing. Yeah, so I'll put that in bucket 2. Next slide. This is the one that talks about the suicide data based on Broomfield's data. For the time being, there were 24 out of 27 incidents were suicide. And this second part, in an effort to improve mental health, was the part that Councilmember Anderson and Councilmember Ward were just discussing. Generally, is this one okay as is, or would council like to continue discussing? Let's do that. Generally, is this one okay as is? Or does anyone want to continue the discussion on this one? It looks like generally there's support for this one, so this will go in bucket 1.
Okay.
Next slide. This is the second part of paragraph 9. We need the state to pursue reasonable solutions based on state data that can be shown to reduce the most prevalent gun violence in our state and communities. The solutions could include, but are not limited to, regulations on, and that replaced a sentence. Now, Councilmember Anderson just talked about potentially a new amendment related to the use of assault weapons, high capacity magazines. I don't know. I'd like to address her first edit first. Generally, does anybody have issues with the first proposed edit right now? Because what I think we can do, Councilmember Anderson, is address that separately. Okay, so this will go in bucket 1. The second part of paragraph 9, in addition to improving mental health outcomes overall, solutions to an immediate crisis must also be considered and tied to the enactment of new laws or existing laws such as ERPO. And then it has a sentence that was moved earlier up to the statement. Anybody have any issues with this one going forward? Okay. And then this is the last paragraph. So it seems to me that, this is part of the discussion, this last paragraph of what the charge is. So it seems to me that other than paragraph 6, sorry, slide 1, Kyle. That 2 themes, part of paragraph 6 and the last paragraph, I would like to propose that council consider voting on Anderson's amendments, the other Anderson amendments, if this is making sense.
It does.
Okay.
I'm following. So there's really just 2 parts where it looks like there's not consensus that we
Yes.
should pull out. Should we pass or consider the ones that are in agreement or that have consensus
That's
first?
sort of what I was asking, just to try to focus the discussion.
Okay. Is everybody amenable to that process? All right. So I'm going to wing it here. Well, no, because
Sort of, I mean,
Well-
so here, I'll word it out for you.
Okay.
If there could be a motion to approve group 1 of the Anderson amendments. And see if
Okay.
that's second. Stan, do you have a question or sorry?
I do, yeah. I'm just getting confused by this, first of all, and I know we have rules to avoid this. We've implemented rules to avoid this, so this is getting incredibly annoying for me. I just don't know why. I know we have rules for amendments, right? Are we going to follow those rules?
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't be rewriting something on the fly. We had a proposed letter, we had some proposed amendments. Councilmember Chef called the question. I think should be voting on what's before us, what was brought before us. We're parsing a letter that, basically the two letters are very similar. They had the same points. Almost, 95% of it's the same. And again, this is going to be read by a few people and that's it. So I think we're way overthinking this. But beyond that, we have rules. I think we're now, no longer following those rules, and we're piecemealing something, and this has been something that my colleagues have complained about over the years, so sort of piecemealing things on the fly, and we're doing that right now. And just, disappointed and annoyed. Let's just vote.
Well, it is a letter to the legislature. It is not a binding document. It is not an ordinance. It's not a resolution. It is just a letter to ask for something. It doesn't have any power other than a letter. So I don't want to continue this either. And I think Mayor Pro Tem is correct that we're really splitting hairs with the words. And I don't think voting in the two groups is a departure. I think that's a fair way to address this, as the amendment presenter said she was open to flexibility on this. So I think we should just go ahead and vote on the two groups. I guess I have to take discussion
That's
still.
fine. That's fine. I
It's
mean,
a letter.
Staff doesn't have any
I know.
specific needs. on
Councilmember
this.
Ward, you had your hand up first.
Oh, I was just gonna counter Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski's point. I think it is important that council gets to have this discussion on the dais in front of the public and not just backhand on emails. And while, yes, it is just a letter, words do matter when you're asking for something. And you have to be very intentional with what you're asking for. So I think it is important that we get down to the minutia of what's in this letter.
Oh, we are. Councilmember.
Even more so.
Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to approve the amendments contained in group 1.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Leslie. All right. Will the clerk, any discussion? James. Councilmember Anderson and, Leslie had his hand up first. Sorry.
I seconded it already,
Okay, I just want to offer one in response to Councilmember Ward's comment on suicide and mental health. If we wanted to modify this slightly, and if we could add in substance abuse, chronic pain, there's some other common causes. I would be totally, if that would help address Councilmember Ward's concern, I'd be more than willing to do that.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie, you have a comment? Okay. Any other discussion? Councilmember Cohen?
Clarify, block 1 is everything but the education. And the okay, thank you.
Kyle, can you put up? So the two, we are not, the ones
The
we
amendment minus paragraph 6.
Paragraph
and
6?
Paragraph 10.
Thank you. In paragraph 10.
Vote on those separately. All right, we ready? Councilmember Chef?
Just because Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem called out to our rules and procedures. So this is a amendment from the dais. So this does require a 2/3 to be introduced. Is that correct?
And there is a part of me that actually sort of agrees with Mayor Pro Tem. This is a letter. It's more of a motion. It's not an ordinance. We were utilizing the existing procedure in the rules because there's a council of 11 and it's challenging to have a discussion like this, which I agree with Councilmember Ward, from the dais during a public meeting and try to give it some order. So I don't, as your parliamentarian, I don't believe it needs to be strictly adhered to. It was just a nice guidepost to use during this discussion. So my advice would be that you just vote on the group one amendment and then move on to discussion to the other two.
All right, Ms. Rogers, I like that advice. I think, again, this doesn't need to take an hour for a letter. Anything else, Councilmember Schaaf? Okay. Anybody else on the discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marshallson.
Yes.
Schaaf,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Henkel,
Yes.
Jezerski.
That passes unanimously. Now to group two, on the floor. We're still in discussion on those.
Kyle, slide 2. We'll keep that up during this discussion.
I guess it's Councilmember Henkel.
Are we discussing? Sorry, we were kind of talking. Yeah, so I just want to push back a little bit on what we're saying, that what the public is saying about education. It was actually very clear on the first reading. I heard over and over and over from actually both sides that they want education. It was during the second reading where some members started to pull away and say, well, we want education, but maybe we just don't want it mandatory. But I feel like we have a very strong sense that we need the education piece of it. Because otherwise we're not doing anything. So I really want to note that I don't support this, and I like the words as is, because that's the reason why we wrote this letter in the first place. I think if we add this amendment, it strips away the reason why we wrote this letter in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that we need to reflect on whether there was in the room at the time agreement between different, people's opinions. The council basically felt that education was critically important, and we agreed to defer it to the state to take their responsibility to act on it. And I think that's what we need to say. Please act on a viable education program so that all gun owners know how to safely manage their weapons.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Anderson?
Still, if there's a different way to word this, I still think it's important to recognize, we had a very, and I'm going to disagree with, Councilmember Marshall-Holsham, so that I didn't run as a gun sense candidate. I've had an overwhelming response, feels like just like the response was back in oil and gas, was like one of those big topics. I have received more comments on this issue and the concerns over not being heard here. So I strongly disagree. There's support amongst the council, but we did not have an overwhelming response from support from the community. So I just want to, however we want to state that, we can clarify it. I'm also prepared to just vote against the letter if we can't clarify what we are hearing from our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we, rewriting just seems like way too much. Do we vote on this one section? Paragraph 6.
It is really hard to write from the dais. I know Councilmember Anderson has indicated she's open to alternative language, but you're right, to write from here. And I have it up, ready to do it, but it doesn't sound like there's consensus on what
I
to
think the
rewrite
best
it
thing
to.
for council to do is just vote on this, because that will give, everybody the transparency that they need, and we can move forward. That's what it's going to take. So with, do we need another motion in second?
So motion to approve the amendment in paragraph 6.
Okay, a motion. Can I get a motion to approve the amendment in paragraph 6? Councilmember Anderson. Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Schaaf.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Lim.
I agree with the amended wording. It does say there's public support for education of some kind, which is what I heard. And it says there was division on whether it should be voluntary or codified, which is what I heard. So I support this amendment.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Marshall Olson?
Just to clarify, we're voting on just on 6, not on 6 and 10.
Just
Okay.
6, one at a time.
Yeah, I do not support this. I do not, while there may have been disagreement amongst the population, I don't believe there's disagreement amongst the council. I think the majority of council was in favor of the mandatory education. So I think the letter as is adequately addresses that. So reflects that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Lim. Marshall Olson.
No.
Schaff.
Yes.
Ward.
No.
Anderson.
Yes.
Cohen.
No.
Delgadillo.
No.
Henkel.
No.
Jaworski.
Yes.
Leslie.
No.
That fails 6-4. Now we'll move on to paragraph 10. Sorry about that. Oops. Yes. The paragraph 10, what are the issues with this? Councilmember Marshall Olson.
I don't support the amended language because I believe it softens what we're asking the state to do. I think that we do want the state to impose laws regarding the purchase and possession of firearms, and I don't support striking that out. I don't necessarily have a problem with the language ensuring existing laws, but are prosecuted, but I don't want to weaken the ask of the state to impose new laws. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think this really goes against why we wrote this letter. We asked them to impose laws because we felt very hamstrung. So I want to just note that if you punted this off to the state after 6 months of debating, and then you vote for this amended language, it's just so watered down, it wouldn't even make sense. And basically all we're doing is ensuring existing laws are prosecuted to the fullest reasonable extent to prevent repeat offenses. That isn't even something that we really even discussed too much as a council. So I believe we actually discussed the first part where we're striking it out. So I definitely would not support this. Otherwise, we're going against what we wanted to do.
Thank you, Councilmember Leslie.
Yeah, I would keep the in its many forms. I would reinstate the imposed laws regarding, and I would leave the rest of the amended language. That's what I would like to say.
Then I
Make a
guess you
motion.
can't support paragraph 10.
Not as it's written.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Councilmember Shao.
The additions, that's the point.
Okay,
Thank you, Mayor. So I when it talks about in many forms, I mean, there's so many more tools that can be utilized here at the state level. We have a Office of Gun Violence Prevention that is not doing what it needs to do at this point. And that needs to get up and running. They need to staff that, and they need to do studies, and they need to provide grants to the community. So I would say that falls into that in the many forms, but that's in addition to imposing laws that they see fit as well. So I think that making it more broad means that there are more tools that the state could utilize that right now the local communities do not have.
okay, thank you. Procedural question. Could a council member amend this amendment to put the strike throughs back? So you could add those back in if you want to keep the edits, but then reinstate the strike throughs. Just putting it out there, because why not? I got people over here now. Oh, good, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a quick
Before you get called
suggestion
the question.
on that, thank you. Yeah, on that point that Councilmember Schaaf just brought up, and then Mayor, as you were mentioning, maybe if Councilmember Anderson wanted to, it could keep in the red and then just say comma, including imposed laws regarding. So that basically you have the red and the strikeouts in that sentence.
I will.
That's up to
let
Councilmember Anderson, though.
And address that request.
Okay, so at this point, like I'm frustrated that we're not listening to our constituents, so I will be voting against this. So I really don't know whether to, amend it however you see fit.
All right. Anybody else? Councilmember Marshall Olson?
I moved to approve this amendment with the addition of the areas in red, but not strike any language out.
Okay, is there a second? Councilmember Hinkle?
Second it.
All right, is there any discussion? Councilmember Schaaf?
I don't know. Thank you. Just to clarify, so the first sentence, I think will make sense, but the second sentence will not make sense if you keep the strike through in.
It's easily
I-
edited.
Yeah.
Can I make an amendment to my amendment?
Oh, why not?
I move to amend, to approve this amendment, adding all the red, keeping all of the, not striking through anything and adding an and in between offenses and close.
If you give me a sec.
That's a
Comma.
long sentence, though. It's kind of a run on. Saying.
Oh, Kyle, can you refresh?
Yeah, that works.
We need you to provide consistency across the state for lawful firearm owners and users, ensure existing laws are prosecuted to the fullest reasonable extent to prevent repeat offenders, and close the gaps between local ordinances that lawbreakers seek to exploit.
It's no worse than a whereas, right? Okay, so we have a motion. And a second, Councilmember Leslie.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Marshall Olson,
Yes.
Schaaf,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jaworski, Leslie,
Yes.
Lim.
Yes. Thank you. That passes unanimously. So we have to go back and vote on the amended letter. All right, do we have to have discussion?
Sorry.
Do we? No, okay. Will the clerk please call the roll on the amended letter?
Schaaf,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
No.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jaworski, Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marshall Olson.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes 9-1. Thank you all very much for a robust debate. While the city and county attorney's report is next, Ms. Rogers, do you have a report?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The city and county manager's report is next. Ms. Hoffman.
I do not, thanks.
Thank you. There is no legislative update this evening and no business before the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority or Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors. This evening, we will hear an update on the semi-annual performance and internal audit. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Bernie Block has been waiting patiently for his biannual report. Mr. Block.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. Bernie Block, Director of Performance and Internal Audit, here to provide an update on the activities I've been working on since we last met in June of 2022. In December of 2022, we conducted a risk assessment where we pay attention to what's going on in local governments, interviewing staff to get ideas for projects and consulting with professional organizations on hot topics to compile a list of potential future audit projects that we then priority rank in consultation with the city manager's office and the city and county attorney. From that comes the annual project plan, which is attachment 1 in your packet, which reflects the projects that will be worked on this year. Are there any questions about the current year project plan that I can answer before moving on?
Generally about the packet. There were a lot of items related to grant procedures that were in question. So I guess I wanted a general assessment. Is this a reflection of an inability to address grants coming forward at all in an efficient way, or is this just an optimization of the grant process? And I guess the reason why I would ask that is because certainly there would be some hope that with the Inflation Reduction Act grants coming forward, with climate and sustainability projects that we might be able to get grants for, that the city would be ready to effectively apply for those grants. So that's why all of those items related to fixing the grant process caught my eye.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lim. You know, grants is an area that is kind of been on the radar for a while. We are currently, the finance department, and have been advising in that, are currently going through a policy revision. It's, you know, there's been some turnover in the grants role. It's like all accounting and finance. There's, you know, a lot of competition for those positions. So they are working in the direction of updating the policy, and the goal is to have something in place here within the new policy within the next few months. As far as why it's come to attention is there's been a big influx in grant funding with COVID, of course, and other types of funding to get the economy going. And so, and it's been more of a focus for the organization due to that influx of funding. Are there any other questions on the project plan for 2023?
I don't see any, Mr. Brock. You may, oh, never mind. Of course, Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to clarify. So the items listed on the attachment 1, those will be completed this year, or those who going to be moved forward?
Those are the projects to be completed during 2023, yes.
Okay, so where they say, so for instance, line 2 is emergency management. We had public comment earlier today regarding this. So where it says not started, that will be completed this year, as opposed to just being moved forward.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome. And I would also say that there, in years past, there's been a lot of, it's been a lot of items that have been related to finance. I'm glad to see that many of those are being addressed, especially those high priorities. So thank you for all your work on those. It makes me feel a lot better knowing that, that those are being attended to. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Shell.
All right.
Okay.
Please proceed.
A quick overview of some of the other items I've been working on since we last met. I still involved in the grant and recovery efforts related to COVID. As far as performance audits are concerned, attachment number 2 in your packet is a listing of the projects and the status, any status changes that have occurred since we last met. So just wanted to pause there, and I know that's a kind of a a busy document. You might need your glasses to read it, but are there any questions on attachment 2?
I don't see any.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
As far as the audits that have been completed, it's financial internal controls. And as I mentioned, we're still working with the grant procedures project. As far as business process improvement projects, we had the fees comparison, the police department administrative support workload analysis. Assisted with the HIPAA plan update. And I continue to consult with provide consultation to management on a variety of topics. Finally, we're rebooting the Innovation Ecosystem Professional Development Program this year. So with that, are there any questions that I can answer?
Any on this segment, y'all? Councilmember Lim.
There were also a number of items related to the CIP projects that referred to the fact that they, the tracking was not quite efficient and it led to, some problems in general. So I guess I just wanted a perspective on how that, if you had a handle on how that will be updated and how quickly that would be made more efficient.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councilmember Lim. A lot of that's been contingent on a new asset management system to help manage all that information. And I believe that is in progress now. I want to say 2024 is when it's slated to be implemented. And that'll provide a lot more opportunities for us to be more proactive in that area.
Okay, cool. Any other questions on this segment? Councilmember Chef, that's right. You did raise your hand. Sorry.
That's right. Thank you, Mayor.
Mhm.
So in addition to finance on this document, there's a lot of discussion around the body worn camera program coming in compliance with Senate Bill 2217, House Bill 21-1250. Many of those are implemented. So I saw the notes that referred that saying that these are going to continue to appear on here until all the documentation has been received and reviewed. But I appreciate those being implemented. The one that is hanging out there that I'm just trying to understand is the one regarding evidence.com. And with relation to how the police information manager evaluating the program and assigning personnel adequately. So can you tell me how this one is going to be implemented with regard to the time spent to, I think it was redact video?
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Schaaf. The police department has moved that position into the same division with property and evidence, and they are allocating more resources to that division and having some kind of cross coverage and cross training in that area. Body worn cameras are relatively new. And I think all police departments are trying to figure out how to effectively deal with that mass amounts of footage and how to effectively manage that. And so it's a work in progress, but they're making strides in that area.
Okay, so is for this area, is this effectively implemented since we've hired those positions, or what are the next steps and what is the future work to complete this item?
I believe there's some additional work to be done in terms of to be able to say that everything's been taken care of when it comes to the body worn footage and evidence.com. Like I said, it's an area that I think a lot of departments are dealing with. But they are making progress in that area, but I wouldn't say that we're completely done yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate your continued work in this area as well as our police department's work in this area. This is one in which, as you said, this is a major conversation right now. And I'd love to be continuing to lead the state and the nation in terms of body worn cameras and the policies around those body worn cameras. So we've done great work in here and I'd love to see it continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schaaf, Chief Himpelman actually is up next, and I'm sure she'll be able to fill in a little bit more.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Appreciate the concise update. All right. Our final item on business this evening is an update from the Broomfield Police Department regarding public safety. We'll now proceed with an update from Chief Hempelman.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak here tonight. I'd like to share a little bit of a summary of 2022, what we're doing in 2023, and then a little bit about our crime stats. Next slide, please. So I wanted to put up a couple of our accomplishments. If you look at this, with some of the community programs and engagement, B Corps, I'll expand more on B Corps at the end of this presentation, but it continues to be successful. Just yesterday, I believe, maybe it was today, I've received many letters on Her Own Hero, the self-defense course. We've had, I believe, 8 classes now. Every single one of them was full, and I hear great comments on how that's going. The catalytic converter etching program, I'll expand more on this in the next slides, but as you know, we handed out 450 kits. The steering wheel lock giveaway, we handed out 100 locks. Sadly, we handed those out to victims. And Coffee with the Cop at the library, great success. We continue to do this program. We are part of the Special Olympics. I added a couple things, but we do programs throughout the year to coordinate Special Olympics, from the plane pool, Tip a Cop. For those of you that have been at some restaurant when they've hosted Tip a Cop, the police officers are the waiters, and we kindly serve you and then say, if you'd like to make a donation to the Special Olympics, then we leave an envelope, and it's a great community event. And then Teen Academy and BPD Inside, our previous Citizens Academy. And lastly, Santa Cops. We had such great Santa Cops event this year during Christmas. We were able to donate to a number of children, as well as go by Children's Hospital. The sad part about that was that all the children waved to us from the windows. And previously, when we used to go down to Aurora Hospital, prior to COVID, we used to go in and hand out the presents. So this year we got to see them wave, but we handed out a number of presents to the kids. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at 2022, just kind of a quick summary here, I have to mention the overall morale of the department. This always has to be top priority for us in making sure that our officers are doing well and that we continue to improve communication. As a matter of fact, tomorrow will be my annual chief summary. I'll give them something very similar where we talk about 2022, but also give them the vision of our strategies for 2023. We, as you know, because I shared this a little bit, we had our first department's family night for peer support. We continue to collaborate with the street racing in the metro area. It's quiet right now, probably because of the weather. This is something we have to be very proactive with, especially because once it warms up, then we have to be proactive with working with other agencies, collaborate on where are they going to be, where the event's going to be, do some intelligence on that, and try to really be proactive and present front and center with the street racing. The next one is coordinating really well with North Metro Fire's physician advisory. We discuss everything from fentanyl deaths to Narcan and next steps when we're on scene working together. We continue to work really well with our chart team. National Night Out, I know all of you were there. And lastly, great success with the Breast Cancer Awareness Month with the Pink Patch. Next slide, please. So I'm doing this a little differently. I wanted to give you a few interesting facts. So in 2022, 265 vehicles eluded police. I think that's an important statement for us to share. And one of the first bullets there is officers did not pursue to ensure public safety. I think when we watch the cops TV show, I think there's this image that we're going to just chase everyone till the wheels fall off. Well, we have a very strict pursuit policy, and we have to have very strict parameters as when we will pursue. So we are lucky enough to have what's called Star Chase. Star Chase is this, and I'm sharing this publicly because I think our bad guys already know about it. But it's a tool that we use, and it's a dart that shoots out of the police car, and it's a real sticky little thing that just shoots out of the car, attaches to the suspect vehicle so that if they elude us, we shut down, we pull over. We have very strict policies on this. And then it GPSs their vehicle, automatically alerts dispatch that it's been activated. And then what we could do is at least try to go to the scene where it finally stops and retrieve the victim's car, sometimes with the suspects in it, sometimes without. But we do have this tool, and it's been quite successful. Another additional interesting fact I've shared previously that we were excited to hire a crime analyst. He's officially in place, and he's been working very well with our special enforcement plans, which I'll speak a little bit about in the next slides. And he's providing the data that's really going to be our success to the future of trying to be proactive with where is this crime occurring? How can we be strategic about where we're going to be in present? And then I kind of I wanted to share a little bit about our detention center. It's funny, in our detention center, no news is good news. And when you're looking at a correction facility, it is ironic that the absence and lack of activity is what is really our success. And I really think that that's the procedural justice and how we treat our inmates. We have 86 inmates. The average, I think today we had 122, if I remember correctly. I had to mention that we no longer had COVID restrictions because we did still have COVID restrictions last year in 2022. And since then, in the last 10 years, the ADP, which is the average daily population, has increased 46%. One of the things I really want to share, and I think is great success for us in Broomfield, is the inmate programs. We have over 216 programs. I listed a couple: Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. You can get your GED, Bible studies, church services of any denomination, resume class, job skills. We offer all of this to our inmates in our detention facility. And I know you've heard this before, but I wanted to remind everyone that 28% of inmates that are in custody are from Broomfield. So a lot of the bad guys or gals are coming into our city from other jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So 2023 and future goals. So this is a little bit about what we're going to be working on during this year. Officer Survival Program. This is a new program that I've discussed with our deputy chiefs and the future of our department. And it's really specific training on quick decision-making during routine and critical incidents. This is really the nuts and bolts of being safe when we're dealing with any incident, whether it's someone that has a mental health crisis, or whether it's someone that's armed, or whether it's just a routine everyday traffic stop. And so we really want to teach our officers how to approach and always make sure that they go home alive. Next thing we're working on is the review of the space needs in the building. As you've all heard many, many times, we have outgrown our building, so we continue to review the space needs for our building. This next one is something I'm quite proud of. It's the Special Enforcement Team. We actually just promoted a new sergeant who's going to go to the patrol division, and from that, we will pull one of the tenured sergeants or senior sergeant, and we're going to create the Special Enforcement Team. So this team will gather that data that I talked about previously, get the crime analyst information, and then proactively go target the areas. This will be a special enforcement team that'll be most of the time in plain clothes. They'll work target areas. They will work any situation, whether it's a domestic violence suspect that is at large that we don't have the resources just in patrol to go find, but they will be the ones that proactively go target where that subject may be found. And anything that comes that's a special, unique situation in Broomfield where we don't have the resources for the day-to-day officer to be handling, this team will be handling that. So this is very exciting. So we have to come up with, the sergeant will come up with who this team is going to be with, along with all of our leadership helping create that team. And then we'll give very specific guidelines. We'll have to create the policies, the SOPs, and be very strict. And this is the type of team that in your organization can really help prevent some of the crime. And that's our goal. Recruiting and hiring practices. I know Bernie was just up here, but he's going to help us review our current practices to make sure that we're up to date. We now have a new app. We have QR codes. We have all kinds of stuff that we're working on to get recruitment. One of the things I heard just today that I was really excited about is our PIO. I know you just mentioned our public information officer. She was telling me that she wants to do this idea. And I said, well, do share. And she said, why don't we do a town hall for the community if they want to know more about the police department for recruiting purposes specifically, not just every day, what is the police doing, but recruiting purposes. So this is something I said, I love that idea. So we're going to move forward on that. And then the next one is the community engagement program. I know about, I want to say is a year ago, Commander Wichlats gave a little quick summary on community engagement. Well, we're finally going to roll it out. It's about a 1 to 3 year program. It's going to start, we have 2 classes scheduled. Basically, it's going to be where we just engage our community, ask the question, are we providing the service that you want? Is there something that we're missing? What do we do well? What don't we do well? What do we need to work on? That messaging is critical. So we're going to start it with our city department staff and just get a feel from them. How do you perceive the police? Specifically to Broomfield, though. I think that's really unique and really important because we're different from some other agencies. And I really want to hear, how are we doing here in Broomfield? So we'll continue that community engagement program. The next one, I think a gentleman mentioned a little bit ago, we're going to be doing our first seminar here in Skystone. We have a community mock training scenario that's scheduled for the 22nd. Emergency preparedness will be there. The fire department will be there. We'll have leadership there, and we'll just do a full evacuation drill to the Skystone community. And lastly, we have the Her Own Hero, not lastly, because I think I have 2 more things here. Her Own Hero event. I know I sent you all an invite for March 8th. Very excited about it. I have to share one of the coolest things is I sent an email to our city department leaders. And I said, if you would like to have a booth at our event and really tie it into women and safety, and every single department head said, absolutely. So if you come, you'll see that this has become a quite large city event. And even our Kristen Pritz, our open space, she said, we'll talk about coyotes and safety and running and safety on the trails. And I mean, and all that just ties in together to make, that is so unique of city and county of Broomfield, how we all come together and communicate, just really work collaboratively when we need it. The next one that I'm quite excited about, it's called Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. It's a brand new program that is being implemented out of Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. This is truly created to prevent police misconduct, avoid police mistakes, and promote officer health and wellness. This program requires support from our community, support from you all, support from the city leadership. And it's truly going to be to look at how are we doing as a law enforcement agency to make sure that we're complying with our laws, but more than that, how do we prevent police misconduct? And one of the things that really kind of pulled me into this training when I started researching it is it really, for example, it really helps the officer on scene who might be struggling with an individual. Sometimes you have that personality conflict. They like me, they don't like you. And it's really identifying and helping each other out as peers to say, you don't communicate well with this person, or you're struggling. Let me do this one. I'm able to talk to this person. So it's really, that's the first step, is to help each other out. And then the second really big step is that preventing misconduct and being able to say, this was wrong and I'm going to report it. So this is a new platform I'm really excited about. It's going to take us probably 2 years to implement it fully because there's very strict rules, and the agenda that they put behind this so that you're supported with this program is critical. It really has to have, the community has to provide us letters. I have to provide letters. Ms. Hoffman has to support the program to say we will be in 100%. And then we train the trainers. So our officers will go to the training, they'll come back and they'll bring the training, and it's holding each one of us accountable to what we do and why we wear the badge. So this is something I'm really proud of, and I'm looking forward to what it brings. Lastly, I don't know how many of you have heard of Alive at 25. State Patrol has something nationally that they've done. Quite exciting. It's a nationally recognized program, but the purpose is to keep anyone under 25. And it's Alive at 25 because they say once you reach 25, your risk of being involved in an accident or driving fast or doing all the crazy things you do when you're young go down tremendously. So this program, we've paired up with the courts so that if someone gets a ticket or is in an accident, the courts can give them options. Instead of just paying fines and costs or even jail time, the Broomfield Police Department is going to be hosting classes, and the judge will say, okay, instead of paying this fine and whatnot, you can attend Alive at 25 on a Saturday morning, 8 to 12. We go through, bless you. We go through driving classes. We do driving courses, backing up, doing little maneuvers, all kinds of stuff where we, the police department, provide the training. We've been trying to do this for a long time, and we actually have everyone involved ready to go, and we're going to move forward on it. Next slide, please. And the wonderful numbers of our crime stats. So motor vehicle theft, as you can see, continue to increase. They didn't go up huge amount from the previous year. So this is, you're looking at is 2020, 2021, and 2022. So that's the one increase, and that continues to be up as you hear on the news nationally. I wanted to share a little bit more than just numbers to you. I wanted to let you know that the top 5 vehicles stolen in 2022, Honda Civic, Chevy Silverado, Kia Sportage, Kia Optima, and Ford F-250. Those continue to be the ones that are stolen. The vast majority that are stolen are usually 70% of them are recovered within 30 days. And you're probably wondering, where are they stolen from in Broomfield? A huge percentage of them are on the west side of our town, specifically Via Vara, where there's a large complex of apartment complexes now. RTD is always a hot spot because people park their cars and they leave and no one's there all day long. And then a lot of the West Interlochen area because they're businesses, right? So that's a lot of the areas that we're showing the motor vehicle thefts. And I always get asked this question. It's an interesting fact. They always ask me, where are they being recovered? Denver. Denver's the number one place where Broomfield cars are being recovered. Federal Heights, some in Broomfield, and then lastly in Westminster. And burglaries are down. That's wonderful to see. They're down from 2021. A lot of the burglaries, 55% of them are businesses, and there's forced entry into the businesses. And then robberies are down substantially, as you can see. And lastly, theft from motor vehicle is down. I don't know why. Only thing I could imagine is now they're not breaking into cars and stealing them. They're just stealing the whole car instead of just the stuff that's in it. I didn't know, I think I'll share this with you because I always get asked about catalytic converters. We are down in catalytic converters now compared to this time last year. I do think it's because of the cold weather. They don't want to get down and underneath the cars, and it's cold and it's yucky and it's dirty. I don't have any other theories as to the why. That's the only thing we could think of. So I thought I would share that. And one last thing, the theft from motor vehicles, most of those cars are unlocked or left running cars that are broken into. I want to share something quite interesting about our special enforcement plans. When we talk about what the police department does to prevent crime. So there's certain times where we overlap shifts. And so at that time, we might have 3 or 4 officers that overlap. And what we try to do is, instead of just saying drive in circles and be proactive or respond to calls, we actually do special enforcement plans. We call them SEPs. So during this last quarter, we had 21 SEPs. And I want to give you a little bit of stats as to what was the outcome of those SEPs. So we had 24 arrests during those SEPs, 21 warrant arrests, 6 summonses, 309 fentanyl pills, 67 grams of meth, 3.94 grams of mushrooms, 8.8 grams of crack cocaine, 3 stolen guns, 5 recovered stolen vehicles, During that time, we had 10 vehicles that eluded us and over 100 hours on the special enforcement plan. So our goal as an organization is to continue those special enforcement plans through that set team and really work proactively to target those crime areas. And I'll add this last note. I think there was a question maybe at the last council meeting about porch pirates, if I understood it correctly. And I know a lot of information comes out from next door. All
And we-
factual, of course.
Yeah.
So we only had 29 porch pirate thefts in Broomfield last year. So I just wanted to make sure to share that. And most of those were in December, Christmas time. Next slide, please. I wanted to share just a few of our NIBRS reportable crimes. So homicides, we had 5 in 2021, and then we had 3 just last year. And of those 3, we had 2 of those that involved a knife and 1 that involved a firearm. We did have some sex assaults, and you see that increase of sex assault. I want to just clarify a couple things, because when you just see a number like this without any content, it's alarming, right? From 42 to 64. But I want to also share that a lot of those are peeping toms, groping, indecent exposures are on a high increase. And a lot of those, we don't have an identified suspect. So someone just does an indecent exposure, someone calls 911, they take off, we get there, they're gone. And that's a lot of those sexual assaults. And lastly, assaults are up, but again, 29 for the total year. So I really want to put that, maybe it's 28 with my glasses here. I really want to make sure we see that that's for the whole year of 2022. Next slide, please. I think B Corps continues to be successful. I wanted to put this up here just by month. You'll see the increase in our mental health calls, 68.82 from the previous year. I think a lot of you have met Commander Wiederquist, who leads B Corps. That's going to transition to Commander Svila in the patrol division. And he will be just as wonderful as Commander Wiederquist. But I really had a good conversation with Commander Wiederquist to say, do we have any idea why, what kind of calls are we seeing? Why the increase? And from looking at some of the stats, he really believes it's the uptick just due to increased public awareness. The more we educate, the more people are using the resources, which is what we want. And so hopefully with our proactivity and being present and letting the community know that we're there for them and to support them when they are in a crisis, they're being utilized the way that we want it to work. He did tell me staffing is working well and the team that they have is doing really well. So I just wanted to pass that along. Next slide, please. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Hempelman. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anybody who would like to be heard, please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Roxy Jewell in Lackamore. One of my things is the community watch. They don't really call it that no more. And I'm stuck down on a long cul-de-sac. And we are pretty tight in that cul-de-sac. So when we see strangers running up and down the road or going up and down our open areas, it's kind of concerning. So would that help out your special group? When we see strangers, that don't belong there, or they're right at the back doors of people's houses?
Chief Hempelman, would you like to address that?
Yes, of course. So I would say anytime you see someone who doesn't belong in your neighborhood, don't change anything you do. Call 911. If there's someone suspicious, our special enforcement team is really going to be where they gather the data after the fact and then react to where can they hit next. So proactively approach all the information that's already occurred and then try to be proactive. So for in your instance, let's say your neighborhood consistently gets hit Friday night at 6:30 p.m., 3 Fridays in a row. Then that team's going to gather that info and say, from a predictability standard, we're going to sit in that neighborhood at 5:30 or 6:30 Friday night next week and see if it happens again. So that's how they'll work proactively. So you can't call them. You call the police, call 911 when you have an emergency or the non-emergency number. if it's not an emergency. And then we will do the work behind the scenes to make sure that team is successful.
Thank you, Chief.
Good evening again, Council. John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. Chief, thank you for these updates. I learned something at each one, and I really appreciate that you take the time to do it. I do just want to clarify something. When a car is stolen, who caused the theft? Is it a thief or thieves, or is it the car's rightful owner? And then a couple questions. What percentage of property crime results in an arrest, and what percent results in a conviction? And of those arrested or convicted of a crime in Broomfield, what percent are repeat offenders? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ewell, I'm going to have to rewind this later and pull up all your questions. I don't have those stats now, but we definitely, those are things that we can absolutely gather. I think your first question though was it the thief that caused the theft, or was it the car's rightful owner? Well, so I'd like to say that everyone makes good choices, right? But sometimes if you leave your car running, then it has a higher chance of getting stolen. So I think to your point, I think we all have to work together, the community and the police department. And you've heard me say this, and I'll say this for the entire time that I wear a badge, is the community's the eyes and ears for the police department. And so that's how we work together to prevent crime. Did I answer your question? I know you had several others, but those all have to get answers to. Okay. Right.
Yes, if you leave it running, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
Was that a trick question then?
No, not really. It comes up often in this room.
Oh, I don't believe in victim blaming. No. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. So any other public comment? Let's go to council questions and comments then. We'll start with Councilmember Leslie, then Henkel.
Thank you, Chief. Really an excellent report, very thorough. I would like, though, to ask you to take advantage of Mr. Ewald's suggestions in terms of outcomes as you report to us in the future. I really do think it's important not just to see what the numbers of crimes are, but what the outcomes are in terms of the strategies that the department is implementing, both to try to prevent those crimes, but also what are the consequences? So I really agree with the concept that, how many of these criminals have been convicted, how many of them are repeat offenders, whatever. That kind of data I think is really valuable for all of us to see. So I'd really like to see you build that into your regular report, not just certainly answer Mr. Ewald's question, but I think adding that in for the future presentations, assuming the data is available. And I understand that it may not always be available to you, or the kind of data we'd like may not just be available, but whatever you can do to show us what the consequences are to the initiatives that you're creating. I think they're wonderful, and I know that the judge is also working with you on that Alive at 25 program. And I love that synergy. I think that's a wonderful thing that both departments are collaborating to save lives. And I think that's again, another opportunity for us to build that kind of community relationships, to build a greater appreciation, understanding by the citizens for the work that both units are doing as part of Broomfield's efforts. So there's really some really hearty good stuff here. And I'm really pleased with this new initiative you're looking at in terms of preventing police abuse. It's so much in the news, so many awful things are happening, and we want our own officers to be protected among themselves. And that's a leadership thing. So having the leadership on site to make sure those kinds of episodes don't happen here is really, really important. So I just want to commend you for that initiative. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this presentation. I know you've kind of had a long day, haven't you?
It's okay.
Yeah, I just really appreciate all of this. I notice a lot of this is just community outreach so that their first contact with a police officer is a positive one. And that goes from kids to adults, and in people who are just curious. And then I like the recruitment aspect of it. I don't think we're hurting nearly as much as our surrounding counties as far as hiring police officers, but we could always use more that are doing the right thing. I did want to push back just a little bit on comments on calling if there's a stranger on your street. I want to be very cognizant that we always have strangers on our streets. So that might not be an appropriate place to call the police. We had someone that called the police because someone had white face paint and they said that they kind of spooked them. And it was unfortunate because they weren't doing anything illegal. So just make sure that if it's suspicious, it's truly suspicious. Anyway, that's a little soapbox moment there. I appreciate, I think on one of your slides, do you mind going back, I think, to one of your first slides? It talked about survival, police officer survival. It was one of the first bullet points on there. Can you elaborate on that one?
The Officer Survival Program.
Yes. the
Yes,
Officer
so
Survival Program.
that's going to be, so as a matter of fact, just today I was reviewing with Deputy Chief Goodell. That's going to be a team of officers that trains the officers on how to respond to calls from a different standpoint, and it's going home is how the end result. So when you deal with so right now we do training every day on every topic, everything involving police. This will be very specialized to recognize safety factors, recognize if someone's having a mental health crisis and what you need to do on that. So it's really a different way of thinking. So it's the training that we have is great, but this is a next level up to making sure that they're thinking about all the factors that are around them, being aware of your surroundings, slowing down the scene. It's a very slowed down approach to what's happening when you get to the scene. So if you see a crisis, you're able to slow it down and recognize it. So it's a training that we wanted to do for a long time. And so it's a new team that's going to come together and they're going to attend training, and then they will too be train the trainers to officers. So that's what it's really about.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'd be more interested in knowing even more details than that. That'd be great. And then I know that some of our members were first ones on the scene, like in Boulder. What does it look like if we have with the Boulder shooting? What does it look like when we have officers that are suffering from PTSD and their recovery? What does that retainment look like? What does that help look like for mental health? Because I feel like that is one of the most important topics for our police officers and their families. Husband served in the Army, and you always have those effects of violence. How are we taking care of our police officers and their PTSD?
Yeah, I thank you for asking that. So we have a number of things in our department. So we not only have peer support, we have chaplains, we have psychological services. So we've had a number of times where if officers go to a very critical incident and especially when it's involving a small child that is killed or just passes away in an accident, whatever the situation, whatever we deem is critical. And when I say something that might be hard for me to see, might be different from a different individual. So we really put it on our first line supervisors to notify our peer support, notify our chaplains, or notify any supervisor within the organization to say, we dealt with a terrible thing today and we need to call our crisis team. And we immediately, no questions asked, activate our team. We call peer support. The entire team comes out. We set up rooms in the major, just different areas across the police department. We set up our psychologists. We call them. They'll respond to the police department. They'll stay there as long as we need, whether it's just the next day or for a couple days, or to set up personal meetings one-on-one for them to go chat with them. And we go above and beyond to make sure that our officers and every employee, sometimes it's even the vicarious employee who has to fingerprint the suspect who hurt a small child, right? So we really reach out to everyone in the organization to say, if you're not okay, it's okay. So let someone know, or you be the one to initiate that call. But we really want our first line supervisors who see every day those type of incidents to proactively page out the team. And it's one quick text. That's how easy it is to activate that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to kind of see, how that is kind of fleshed out and even more so, how quickly they're back on the streets if they're not ready yet, or what that kind of checks and balances looks like.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then just one more, it's not even a question too much, I guess, but I'll probably send you some more information. We had some Denver ordinance on the catalytic converters talking about how when they resell them, they have to like register them, I believe. I'll send that off to you. And see if that's something that maybe we could do. One of my refugees actually had to scrap his whole entire $3,000 car that he saved money for because his catalytic converter was stolen. So we're having, and he isn't the only one. We've had many emails about catalytic converters. So I appreciate the etching program for sure. But if there's something more that we can do, I would love to pass some more ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
All right, so I just have the one question from earlier, and I'll reread this question that Mr. Ewald had asked during the other public comments on the letter on gun ordinances. In that letter, we state that the police department educates the public on gun safety, which has been like, this whole discussion has been around that education on gun safety. So here were the questions that he had asked. Can more information be shared on those sessions and police department education? When, where, what topics were discussed, and how were these events advertised? I think there's great interest in like what's already happening and how that can be enhanced.
The only police department education that I'm aware of is what we offer our officers. We don't offer anything to the community on education. Now, if we attend a community event and someone asks, we will be happy to provide, we provide the gun safety locks and provide them information on the law. But as far as the training goes, the only information I could speak on is what we provide to our police officers.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I just will admit I'm crushing on the Star Chaser thing. Can I have one? So, because I'd like to shoot them at the vehicles I see constantly brazenly running red lights in my neighborhood. It's something that I drive to Denver every day and I seem to feel like I see it in Broomfield far more than I should. I don't know if there's any enforcement mechanism on that, but every day when I go to turn on Lowell, I stop and wait a couple seconds on the green light because quite often there's somebody just going right through it. So you mentioned earlier on your presentation, I just wanted to ask, you talked about the morale and retention. What are our rates? Are we, and how do they compare? Are we doing well with retaining our officers?
We're doing outstanding. I don't say that lightly. We just had a sergeant who retired from the detention center. As a matter of fact, if you follow Facebook, we put his picture up after 22 years, so we'll have to fill that. We are down 3 individuals, but it's due to retirements. We're doing great on staffing. I just had this discussion at, I think I was telling Ms. Hoffman at one of our chiefs meetings, where these agencies, and I actually feel bad listening to them because they'll say, well, as you all know, we're all struggling to recruit and hire. And I don't dare say I'm not, because but so I've learned, a few months back, I'd say, well, we're doing okay. And they continue to struggle, but we really are doing well.
Thank you, because I have heard the same stories of police agencies having difficulty. Real quickly, you mentioned ADP, or at least the growth in prison inmates over the last, I think, decade, which at the same time our population was doubling. So it feels like we're actually below what we might anticipate for that population. And just curious, the capacity of detention center, are we in good shape?
We are doing good. And I can't remember the total, DC Goodell, is it when we were full, 224? Yeah, when we're at full capacity.
One last real quick question. I'm just curious because it's something, as I work in Denver, we're dealing with is fentanyl. And we are now actually, my university, stocking Narcan in all our AED stations and looking at fentanyl strips. I don't know if we've seen that problem to the same degree. I know it's been massive in the Denver metro, but more likely in Adams and Denver and some of the more urban areas. But are we seeing fentanyl sneaky into this community as well?
Well, we are utilizing Narcan. I don't have the number I can find out, but we have utilized Narcan on some critical incidents where we have had overdoses, and it has been successful.
I would encourage people, the training video on Narcan is about 15 seconds. It's very easy to use. It's very cheap. So I know some parents now are starting to carry it themselves. So if they have house parties, they can be prepared. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshallson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate everything that you do and keeping the community safe, and the fact that we never seem to have the issues that we hear in the news from surrounding communities. So that's a testament to Broomfield and the way we do things. Couple questions on the B Corps. You said the amounts are up 66% over last year.
Yes.
Is that something where you were thinking, do we have the capacity to deal with that or are you going to need more funding?
I think we're doing well right now. I asked that question when I met with Commander Weiderquist, just I get a monthly briefing from him unless he needs to brief me more often. And he says we're doing well with how we're doing. And I think a lot of those follow-ups are the next business day, or they've already touched base with an individual, or they have new information. So they count those as still following up, even if it's weeks or days later.
Okay, thank you. And then a question on the vehicle thefts. Are we counting vehicles that are stolen outside of Broomfield that belong to Broomfield residents?
No,
Okay.
only if they occur in Broomfield.
Okay. And then actually just one final question on the Star Chaser. I kind of follow up on, my actually question is different, is maybe it's more for Nancy, are there Fourth Amendment concerns with that?
There have been, and in criminal cases, people who have been apprehended after Star Chaser was used have challenged it as a search that was unlawful, and they haven't carried the day. So as of right now, the use of Star Catcher is still considered constitutional. It's
That
not,
hasn't gone up to the Supreme Court yet, has it?
No.
Because I know they ruled on other GPS cases in the past.
right. Yeah, no, and this one is more external. So that seems to be the dividing line, but I can get you more information on that.
Right.
It is an interesting case study.
That's all.
Can I share one additional thing?
Yeah.
I would say most of the time when we're utilizing Star Chase, it's a stolen car.
Okay. And actually along those lines, is there any way that we could, I know we do like the engraving for the cal converters. Is there any way that is there any sort of technology that we could provide to residents that would allow them to track their own cars? I know like newer vehicles have, GPS installed most of the time, but older vehicles wouldn't. So does the technology exist for that? And is something we could provide?
I'm not familiar with that. The only reason I say that is it'd be really difficult for us to have when you talk about the constitutional rights, for us to do anything like that. From the owner standpoint, that's something they would have to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski.
Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate their presentation. Always informational. And yeah, the Star Chaser program definitely caught my attention. It sounded a little James Bond-like with the shooting arrows out of the car. And I was sort of taken aback by the whole 265 vehicles that are eluded. So as you mentioned, I guess a lot of those are stolen cars. And is there anything else you guys can do? I'm assuming you're getting their license plates and just checking up on seeing who owns the car?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that a lot of times if they're taking off, it's many times a stolen car, but they've committed some other crime. And so when we finally are able to GPS it or stop it or locate it, then we recognize that inside the car, there's there's either a bank robbery or something else that's happened, evidence of other crimes. And so we follow up as much as we can. Like I said, a lot of the bad guys or gals are finding out that they just attached something to my car and so they immediately abandon the car. But we work as proactively as we can. We always run the plate, we run the VIN to make sure that sometimes they switch plates, make sure that the car is stolen. It's not just a stolen plate. So there's things that we do follow up on. If we can identify the driver, we make sure to follow up on that. And if it leads to a felony, our detectives get the case assigned to them and then they follow up as well.
And you're catching that plate right away, I'm assuming. So
Yeah, that's the first step.
if you don't get the car, then at least you have
Yes.
something. Okay, awesome. And then car thefts, of course, that's the biggest thing that I ever hear about, crime wise in Broomfield. I think that's great from the standpoint that there's nothing really worse than that. So, kudos for that. But I guess two questions is, number one, is it typically more a day crime or a night crime? So I know you mentioned like the park and ride lots over in Via Vera, but is it more the stuff I hear about on next door is usually someone walking around the neighborhood. They're, have a picture on a Ring doorbell cam of someone walking the neighborhood and then a car gets stolen. So
I think with our motor vehicle thefts, for example, this week we've had 8, so they're all just different times. It depends on if they're locked, unlocked, location, all those things matter. Daylight, daytime, all those factors come into making the decision for a thief as well.
And then what can we or what are we doing to sort of try to knock that number down? And I know that's the question everyone has is,
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I'm hearing the frustration that there's nothing that we can do or nothing that we are doing. So I don't know, you could shed some light on that.
I'll shed one small light because I don't want to give away if anybody is watching this that shouldn't be watching this.
Right.
But for example, we do bait cars, we do undercover cars. If we know that there's certain cars, for example, the Kias that are getting stolen, we will get a Kia and we'll plant some keys in there and then we'll GPS it. It's our car. And if someone gets in it and drives away, it'll activate, it'll notify dispatch. We have officers ready to go and then we move in. So we're doing things systematically and trying to be very proactive. We work with our MAT teams, which are special traffic or auto theft teams that are in the North Metro area, because many of these thieves, as I shared earlier, they're dumping these cars in other cities, or they're coming into Broomfield, taking our car and going elsewhere, vice versa. So we have to work regionally with our motor vehicle theft problem. We have detectives that are assigned to CADI, which is Colorado Auto Theft Investigators, and they get the intel. So we're really trying to approach it where if these criminals are crossing the city limits, is try to approach it regionally to identify who they are. And that's been a huge success. So there's this whole step, many steps that come into how we catch the criminals doing these acts.
So I guess part of it is being proactive and hoping that trying to stop it before it happens. And then the second part is maybe catching those that are doing it and preventing them from doing it in the future. Okay. The last thing, and if I missed this, I apologize. I know you mentioned in one of the first slides about the catalytic converter program. Can you, if you already mentioned that, I apologize, but can you
That's okay.
give some information again? on what
Yeah,
that
so
program
we
is?
did a etching program. It was 400, we gave away 450 kits. And it basically, you can take the kit, go home, you can etch onto your catalytic converter, your VIN. And then if it gets stolen, sadly, if it gets stolen, then we can track it back to which car it belongs to. The most difficult thing about the catalytic converter thefts is that when we do recover one, we don't have any information on who it belongs to. So that was an etching program that we coordinated with the state and CBI so that we could hand out those kits.
So are we going to continue that program or is that done with?
It's something that it's a one-time thing, but not one time to do it again. So that's something that we're going to try to do again, probably in the summertime. We'll coordinate with CBI. We'll see how many more kits we can do. It's something that everyone can also do at home. If you have some kind of an etching to put your VIN number on your catalytic converter, it's not an easy thing because you got to get under there and do that. But that's something that we'll continue to do through the police department. It takes a large amount of resources to organize it.
Well, I think it sounded like a great program. And are there certain cars that are subject to that type of theft more than others? And
Yes.
easier to-
Did I not share that? Let me see.
She did on thefts.
Thefts,
Yeah.
no, actually, good point.
So catalytic converters, primary car that's targeted is a Toyota Prius, a Honda Pilot, and a Econoline van.
Just the easier ones to get at that actually have those.
I don't know the answer to that. I asked the
Okay.
same question.
Okay.
But that
I
was
think
that was
it's the
specific. to
value
Broomfield.
of the minerals, of the
Oh.
precious metals in certain ones. I'll tell you about that another time.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
No, really. Yeah, I'll explain. Councilmember Shav, without cutting.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep this quick. So I have kudos to you and your team for the Her Own Hero events. I have never heard so many positive comments and no negative comments on any issue in Broomfield. And this is one that has met that mark. So kudos to you. I'm glad that you're continuing. I'm glad that you're expanding it to the Women's Safety Day. I think this is tremendous. And I look forward to more positive comments and zero negative comments. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to touch on was the Neighborhood Watch Program. So this is something that has kind of taken a hit with the COVID pandemic. There were groups that weren't getting together. If a neighborhood wants to revive their Neighborhood Watch Program, how would they go about doing that? Who would they contact to kind of get that started and going again?
Yeah, so Rachel Haslett is our public information and public education officer. And she's the one that coordinates all that. And she is wonderful. She'll actually come out, she'll host a community event. We'll have officers respond. We give them the information on what's going on in their community. She'll do it monthly, quarterly, whatever is requested. So she's the one that coordinates all that for the department. You're welcome.
Thank you. And Councilmember Delgadillo, you're up.
Hello. So I had a question about the Star Chase program and about the decision to pursue a suspect or not to pursue. So I do really appreciate the fact that we all recognize, and it seems you and your department really recognize that the world is not a buddy cop comedy, right? So there could be a lot of risk for the community, for the officers, for people involved in pursuing a suspect. So I'm just curious about how the officers are trained to make that decision to pursue a suspect, to then, or maybe use the Star Chase technology, or what that decision looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. So train. That's the first step. So we do in-service training every quarter. And what that entails is going over policy to make sure that they understand the policy. Also, when we do our driving training, we actually put them through scenarios. We even let them drive fast at a driving course that we go to and try to make the decision that split second right then and there. Would you start chase? Would you pull over? Would you pursue? If you're going to pursue, why? So the key really is making sure that our officers are prepared for any situation. And it goes back to that officer survival training, because if you pursue, you're not only putting yourself in harm's way, which yes, that is our job that we're willing to do and wear the badge, but you're going to put in harm's way maybe someone who's walking with their child or their dog. And is that the risk for a stolen car? And the answer every time will be no. So they really need to walk through that. And then of course we have to have the oversight by our supervisors. There are young officers who are ready to go and you have to stop them. You have to, if they say this vehicle is failing to stop and we're going and this is the direction and this is what we're doing, we have to have that safety net of supervisors who say, are you in pursuit and why are you pursuing? And that's happened. And that's the critical conversations that we have to have. And then the most important part of that is the follow-up, the training that comes with to having with that employee after the fact to say, what were you thinking? Had I not told you to shut down and not pursue, would you have recognized that? So it always comes down to training, and that's one of the most critical components of what we do.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? Well, the reason I know about catalytic converters, it really was a legitimate business for people in my family like a decade ago. You can buy them from the muffler shops or the car garages and then sell them to somebody else. And the value of them, they're tracked by the make and model of the car because they know how much precious metal is in each one and it changes daily. So it really was legitimate until, I don't know, why did it just start to happen? Like it's never been so
they
bad.
finally recognized that that was the way to
Was
make
it a
some money.
secret before? Because they did it for 10 years. I
Yeah.
mean, so that's why I know the value. But golly, it's just the way it's really taken off and just created a lot of problems. If there's anything we can do to crack down on it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, let us know. But I'm just so impressed with all of the programs and really just the positive news based on the crime rates and how little violent crime still happens in Broomfield. And to you, I give my undying gratitude for keeping us this way. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, there are no requests for future action this evening, concluding the items on the agenda. Is there any other business before the council tonight? There being no further business, the council meeting